Hey everyone, welcome to Changemakers, a podcast about becoming an irresistible community. I'm Kelly and I'm here with Susan and Nicholas today. And we have been exploring Peter Scazzero's work called Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, where we desire to transform our community into an irresistible community of love. We want to be transformational in our discipleship. And so if you are a small group leader, a ministry team leader, a church leader, you lead your family or a team at work, this podcast will help you to transform your community into one of love and understanding. So today on the podcast, we have Father Nicholas with us, and we are shooting video for this episode. And so if you're listening via audio, you can log into our website and you'll find the video of this podcast. And if you're watching on a video, we also want you to know that you can listen to this podcast via audio as well on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon.
If you were with us last episode, we talked with Nicholas about incarnational listening, and he gave us some really helpful tips. There are about 10 tips that you can tune in and listen to if you didn't already. And some of those tips are really helpful for people like me who are talkative. But just to give you a couple, you really want to be responsive, give them your undivided attention, maybe even reflect on what makes you defensive during your listening, and even be aware of some of those things in your family's listening style that might help you or what you might be sort of triggered by in the conversation. So you definitely want to tune in and get all those tips if you're looking to be a better listener.
Incarnational listening. I'm not very good at it, but now I'm going to be better at it that we've talked about it. So this is episode 7, and in this episode, we're going to explore our feelings around a certain issue. So we've talked about exploring the iceberg, but in this episode, we're going to get real specific about clarifying our values and why we feel a certain way about a person or a difficult circumstance at work. And we're going to do that using a tool called the Ladder of Integrity. This tool just helps us identify what's going on inside and, if appropriate, then communicating what we are having an issue with. And so Nicholas is going to share with us his experience of the Ladder of Integrity.
Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role here at Nativity?
Well, I'm Father Nicholas Amato. I'm the staff pastor here, which means I kind of work with all the staff and volunteers, volunteer ministers in kind of spiritual deepening, spiritual enhancement, and self-care. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And I love small groups, and I'm in a lot of them.
That's what we love. You are multiplying, making disciples. Well, let's dive into the topic of today. What is the Ladder of Integrity?
Well, think for a moment when somebody was doing roof work for you. They came with a ladder that's an extension ladder. And they'd have the ladder against the house, and if it was a high building, they'd pull a rope and put up a second section of the ladder, and then a third section. And that's kind of how I see the Ladder of Integrity. There are really 3 ladders that extend one out from the other all the way up. And the basic one, the main one, is what's going on inside yourself. What am I feeling? What's going on? Why am I upset? What's my part in this? What's on my mind? What's my reaction telling me? And then you pull the rope, and up goes the second extension of the ladder, and you move from what's going on inside of you to what do you value? Because now you're ready to look at what you value where you weren't before because there was too much emotion going on, and you kind of have to acknowledge that and put it aside. And so now you're in the ladder of value, a little higher up. And now we're looking at why the issues are important. You're looking at, am I willing or not willing to do something? What do I need? What's one thing I need to do to improve? Because your head is so much clearer than it would have been if you try to do this on the first set of cross pieces. So I'm willing or not willing. One thing I could do to improve, and then what's important for you to know? And I can do this all with a clearer head, and then up goes the third extension, and now you're willing to share what will benefit us. So suddenly it's off of you and what can be of help to us in our relationship, and what I hope for, what I look forward to, and now I'm really affirming our relationship. And I can do that because I've gotten in touch with values, and because I got in touch with values because I was able to go inside. Make sense?
Yes. So it's a process to sort of handle conflict. Or when would you use this tool?
Well, I use it, and you don't have to remember all these 10 things. Just remember the extension ladder. So what's inside, what's your value, what do you hope for? So you can use it whenever you're in turmoil. Why are you in turmoil? And that's what's going on inside of me. And it could be with somebody you care for, or somebody you're struggling with, or somebody you disagree with. The second thing, a situation you can use it is that second piece of the extension. What do you value that you want to share? So none of this stuff going on inside you is going to keep you from doing that. So this could be to a trusted friend. It could be to someone you work with. It could be a team member. It could be somebody in the small group that you're a part of. And then you can even use it in just sharing your hopes and your dreams, over a glass of wine in the evening with somebody you care for.
Yeah. So how have you used it, or have you ever had any resolution by using this tool?
Yes, I have used it. The thing that makes it important for me is that there's a saying in theology that grace builds on nature. That statement is the statement of St. Thomas Aquinas, who lived around St. Francis of Assisi died, and then Francis was Aquinas lived after St. Francis. But what he taught was that grace does not destroy nature, that it perfects nature. Grace perfects nature. So if I can get in touch with the rungs of the ladder that have to do with what's going inside of myself, my nature, and if I get in touch with a higher sense of who I am, my values, then at a physical level, I've opened the way for grace to operate. And so it's a really handy-dandy way to kind of have the grace of God flow through you. Another way of translating grace builds on nature is that grace does not remove nature. Grace fulfills nature. But you got to have that nature open up so that grace can flow, if that makes sense.
That's deep.
It is.
So I'm going to process that for a little, but I love that what you said, just like that nature, knowing our nature, what's going on inside is the first part of this ladder, the first rung, that first part of that extension that you referenced. So that really helped me.
And you might not need to take the issue to someone else, right? Like you might just use the ladder to process your own feelings, and then you decide like, oh, I don't need to share this with anyone. I've processed, it's from my family of origin, it's my issue, I'm going to resolve it myself, right?
Oh,
but then
sure.
sometimes it is appropriate to then go have a difficult conversation.
It is. And it could just be an evening of self-reflection, or a part of your morning prayer. Or it could be sharing with other guys in the group, or men and women in the group that you belong to. It's got a lot of uses and applications. But I just think it's so important because you tend to yourself, self-care, and that opens the way for spiritual growth. And that spiritual growth isn't open to you if you don't take care of yourself, and if you're not attending to your feelings and what's going on inside you.
Yeah.
Because then you're always reacting rather than responding. Of course, I never do that. I'm just full
Me neither.
I'm going to check with your roommate on
that. This isn't confessions.
Well, how would you say this tool is in line or aligned to our faith in God?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's aligned in that you come to know your value in God's eyes, because now you've tended to yourself, you've gotten in touch with a higher sense of values. Your values may change, they may deepen. Your hope could change, because now they could be more godly, more faith-centered, more loving, more compassionate. So it's a great little tool, this ladder. If you remember anything from this conversation, this podcast, keep that ladder in mind, because it's really an important skill.
Yeah. Even the hopes, knowing, or the final rungs on the ladder, knowing what the outcome is that you want, or maybe your hope and desire for the relationship after this conflict is resolved. That's a bigger, greater I guess, gift or blessing that you
Right.
could have in this relationship to grow in the relationship. You sometimes have to go through some arguments and
you're
healthy
able to
conflict.
note it. You're able to claim it and name it. Well, you're able to name it and then claim it. Oh my gosh, that was an insight I wouldn't have had because I was on the first set of the rungs, and now I can see more deeply. And as you're reading, as you're hearing the weekly message, the staff podcast for small groups, you're getting new information that you could be more open to because you're at a different level of hearing and understanding and sharing. So it's a valuable tool for groups too, small groups.
Yeah, well, we're grateful for you for sharing your insights on this, your experience with it, and we're also grateful to Peter Scazzaro and Jerry for just trailblazing this culture revolution and giving us some new tools in the family of Jesus. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Nicholas, for joining us, and thank you to all of you for being with us today for the Changemakers podcast. Thank you for being change makers along with us. Please join us for our next episode where we wrap up all of these skills and tools in talking about having a rule of life. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.